in the end, what is important is to highlight and generate value for the user, more than be proud of, yeah, we've been the first one or the last one. Well, we are unlocking value for the user.
One of those very cool companies currently operating in the SME space is Soldo. I could tell you what their elevator pitch is, but the finance manager at Secret Escapes encapsulated that really quite neatly on Soldo's website. So that is, Soldo has been a great addition to our functionality in the finance team. We're able to empower trusted users to make spending decisions whilst maintaining oversight and control. With that, and with the other glowing reviews from businesses around the UK, we're going to take a look at what the product actually looks like with Daniele. So welcome, Daniele. Thanks very much for coming on.
Hello.
It's great to have you on, and as you can tell, there's quite a lot of good sort of vibe coming from the sort of the small and medium-sized enterprise space in the UK about what you guys are doing.
Well, Soldo at the moment is doing something completely new that has never been offered on the market. We are trying to sort of creating a new category, which is business payments and spend management.
Yeah.
So we are trying to create this solution that puts together both two words, let's say so, one from the banking and one from the ERP, the accounting, and the expense management as well.
Yeah.
So we're trying to connect these two words together.
Yeah.
And this is something that so far it was never there before.
Sure. And you do that with sort of operating in a series of like partnerships and also with your own products. So you can see, based on what we're going to see today, is you have an integration with Xero,
yes,
which does a lot of very cool sort of smart account tooling, and then you guys look after at the minute. I would imagine that the kind of the first layer, you know, the customer spending, and then also things in the back end. So like your administrative and accounting sort of software models.
Yes.
So do you have any competitors out there, and sort of what is the key differentiator between you and them?
Well, yeah, if you look at the space at the moment out in the market, there are few players that are doing things that are very similar to what we did.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the real competitor at the moment is the status quo. There are so many processes that are out there, and they are so antiquated and so old and clunky and complex, that most of the times when we go to the market and we try to explore and discover more about what's out there, most of the times it's just old processes. So what we are trying to do is to replace those processes. And the idea of Soldo is not just to, let's say, revert completely what are these processes in a company, especially because we have identified that there are many of them. And sometimes we adjust our product according to the processes that are not yet efficient enough. So what we are trying to do is to get efficiency in these companies and let them focus on their business and just to avoid the chasing the CEO credit card or chasing who did the payment with the sole card that we have.
Yeah.
So that on one hand, taking care of the business payment, and on the other hand, for everything that has to be paid has to be also accounted for. And so we are trying to help the accounting departments and accountants for the small business to finally have a platform where they can have everything in one place.
Yeah, sure. And you in particular, when you're there, sort of, what is your role in all of this big picture?
I'm leading the product and design team in Soldo, at Soldo.
Yeah.
And I ended up there with a kind of weird trajectory. I have a background in philosophy, but I discovered that it's not so weird anymore. I discovered that lots of product managers have different kind of backgrounds and stories. I used to be a game designer before. And from there, I worked in a company where our CEO was a founder, and basically when he started Soldo, he asked me to join, and so I did.
Nice.
I'm quite attracted by complex problems, and so the idea of moving from video games to fintech, where things can get really complicated, was fascinating.
How did you find the transition then from going from sort of your more traditional maybe designing and to, you know, adopting the roles and the ceremonies, if you will, of things of product development sort of strategies and core methodologies?
It was okay, because in the end my background in philosophy helped a lot. The idea of dealing with the abstract concepts and then making your own and trying to elaborate them, it's something that I was already used to, and so the transition between looking at the user experience of a game and looking at the user experience of a product, a fintech product, or in reality any other product, it's very much like observing the reality from a phenomenology point of view,
right.
as a philosopher, let's say so.
Interesting.
And so it was quite easy for me to
Yeah.
transition in that role.
Yeah.
And then from there, in taking into account more realities, so more point of views, that was sort of engaging thing for me.
And so when you're there, you said you look after a lot of the product and design stuff. What do the makeups of a product team typically look like at a company like Soldo?
We were a small group, and now we are growing a lot. We have from product managers to product owners to UX and UI and researchers and writers, and yeah, it's again, I feel very lucky because it's a really good and great group of talented people.
Yeah.
And I feel that we couldn't achieve what we have at the moment if not with them.
And will they typically be founded into little squads or teams? Will people focus on different areas of the product, or how does that work?
Yes, basically we are organized in different segments for enterprise, for the small business, for the mobile.
Yeah.
And what we try to do is to try to understand what are the specific needs of that segment.
Yeah.
So trying to state the problem, and from there understanding what could be a possible solution. Okay. Defining the model, the architecture, and then taking from there and defining what the experience is. Okay. And from there, implementation and delivery, ready to test as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And how would you typically go about testing in these environments? Does that depend on the problem, or would you have a sort of like a fixed approach to that?
It really depends on the problem, because according to the complexity of the problem, we may have a different type of solution. If we are dealing with a simple problem, we may try to have just an internal testing and see how it works, and then publishing it directly to the public. Okay. Or when the complexity is increasing, what we have in place is a sort of beta, closed beta, or open beta, and then public. Okay. So we have different stages according to the nature of.
And will you typically do sort of usability testing as well on groups, or do you keep that within the beta group of your user base? Yes.
Okay. We have implemented a program within our product, which is called The Loop. And basically people using the product can subscribe to it and be part of our product development cycle. Okay. So in a way they can test our prototype and give us feedback and drive in a way the direction.
You seem to have 3 users with 3 different sort of interactions with the product. And how do you make sure that doesn't get too complicated, too complex, and that you can keep focus on what they're doing? And first, how did you define that there were 3 users that you needed to address?
So basically, as you said, we didn't start from everything at the same moment.
Sure.
We started from a very close niche that was the administrator.
Okay.
The first issue that we observed was that there are lots of processes that are in place and needs to be restructured or needs to be managed first and then effectively automated. And the administrator point of view was the first one to strike our attention.
Okay.
And through the administrator, basically you have the setup of the account, because at the end of the day, the responsibility of the company is to take care of their money, and then once they spend it, if they don't want to meet the taxman, they have to account for this kind of money.
Yeah.
So first of all is the administrator of the company, so the finance director or the accountant, let's say in other form, that has to be sure that everything goes smoothly in terms of financial payments.
Okay.
And so we started from there.
Okay.
Then we saw that let's say when somebody is paying for something, is actually not directly the administrator, but it could be an employee, it could be a contractor, it could be anyone.
Yeah.
And so we moved our attention to the person that is spending. That could be anyone really. It's not really just an employee, but it could even be, I don't know, anyone in the organization.
Sure.
Directly related or not. And the spender has a direct impact because they are closer to the information that is needed to account for that expense.
Yeah.
And as a result, we observed as well that the final figure is the accountant. So the accountant has the role to make sure that all the payments are not just wasted, but tax can be claimed and costs can be accounted for.
Yeah.
So that's how basically we built step by step the journey.
Interesting. Well, that's really that's a really good place to jump into the first view, which is the administrator's view, and to look at what that is going to feel like for the user. So I'm going to walk through this. What we see on the screen is we've got this deposit function, which allows us to kind of roll through the side navigation and see what our users are, what their status is, and other crucial bits of information for them to kind of work with from an administrative perspective, and then to manage permissions as well. So what I liked about this initially is the ability for everything to be clearly laid out in terms of hierarchy. But you side nav, top bar, and then loads of space to play on this dashboard, just in terms of not overwhelmed with information. Everything's kind of neatly hidden behind the relevant formats. So that's a kind of a quick view of what it looks like for an administrator on Soldo. The first thing is, so kind of what were these people looking for specifically when you were designing and building for them?
Basically, they are looking what they are currently missing in reality, which is control.
Yeah.
Which is looking at where money goes and trying to understand how they can improve their way of spending.
Okay.
And basically from their point of view now, we have looked at the journey where they set up basically an account. They have to put money in, and once they've done so, they can control their cash flow basically, and allocate money to every person that needs it.
Exactly. And then another thing there was the permission side of things as well. So you've got the money in, and then you're able to sort of change permission according to who's going to be able to access certain things, right? And so ultimately they're the control center. They're at the heart of what's going on in terms of this company's ability to sort of manage their finances accordingly.
Most of these things at the moment are delegated to people.
Okay.
So what we have seen is people doing like crazy things, like copy pasting information from one side to another. The highest level of integration that they may have is downloading a file and importing somewhere else.
Okay.
And so basically, we have to talk a lot with users, and trying to really understand their objective. And it's not so easy because most of the times they are so used to make these repetitive actions that they cannot see other value than doing that.
Okay. And how would you typically approach that with them? How would you gauge from them? How would you tease out from them?
We observe them. Okay. We observe them in their reality, trying to look at what they do and how they do things.
Yeah.
And at that point, we kind of see there are some specific elements that like highlight what the problem is. And at that point, we try to incorporate these elements into prototypes, and we let them test.
Okay.
So at that point, you have like smashing your head against the reality of, well, I used to do some things that were so boring and repetitive, and now with this other solution, it's great. I can finally breathe and focus on other things.
Do you use a provider for pulling in these logos, or do you use card providers? How does that work?
It's a long story in reality, because we ended up creating an internal merchant database.
Really?
Yeah, and
wow, that sounds like a big job.
Yeah, and but we got help from Google.
Okay.
Most of the information that we get from the transactions are already good enough to populate our merchant DBs.
Okay.
And what we are missing, or better, what we are matching with Google, are the information where the merchant is and the specific name. And about logos, it's something that we started in a sort of manual way, and now we are automating that as well.
Okay, perfect. So automating internal processes as well as external ones. That's cool.
Exactly. The process is always the same. Look at the problem, manage it first, and then automate it.
There you go. That's how you do it. I touched on this when we were talking through the video there, but there is you've got to convey an awful lot of information within that page, and maybe you can speak to this more as a designer than many others could. But what is your approach to sort of compartmentalizing page information, making sure that it's all neat? And did you take any inspiration from anything? How do you make sure it's not overwhelming for them?
At the beginning was quite a nightmare, I have to say, because you have in front of you have a lot of complexity, and you don't know really from where to start. But then again, you discover that the reality is done by different type of companies, and everyone is thinking in a different way. So our approach now is trying to give you what, in a way, is the minimum that you would need, and then you can add on top of it all the other information that you would like to have.
Okay.
An example could be we have table with a list of transactions.
Sure.
And in this table, we worked a lot in order to create such a what we internally call a magic table, where you can sort, mix and match the columns for the information that you really need in that specific moment.
Okay.
And given that every company has different needs in a way, because they want to track different things, that is sort of the tool that allows them to achieve. That's
fascinating. Just in general, how would you approach sort of ideation and coming up with new ideas? So, for example, we'll use these ideation workshops and jobs to be done methodology. We'll use that quite heavily in order to help us to prioritize what we want to build and what we want to test against. So we know that based on our customer jobs to be done that we've done our research into, these are the 3 things that really matter to our product and to our users. So we want to be prioritizing based on those.
It's mostly a similar thing.
All right.
What we have in place is a sort of lab for ideas, and we try to put them together, coming from different angles that are coming from the market, are coming from users, coming from internal product ideas, and also part of the vision that we would like to achieve, etc.
Yeah.
And putting all of them together, it gives us the complexity of what we have to do.
Yeah.
And in this sort of mess of anything yet so defined, what we try to do is to give a balance.
Okay.
Because sometimes you have such pressure on things that you have to release because they are an important matter for the users, and what you always try to do is to is exactly the same behavior of demand and offer in the end. You try to make a balance between what you can offer and what is the demand. Okay. And in that sense, we try to prioritize according to effort, according to what is pressing at the moment, and trying to find the right balance.
Okay, and who will typically be involved in those sorts of discussions from the team?
Mostly product managers and the side of the business, the side of the market organization. So those are the three pillars where they contend and try to find the right balance.
Sure, cool. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the next group of people who we were talking about in the first part of this, which is the spender side. So on this mobile interface here, we've got a really nice sort of transaction feed, including sort of a map, and then we're going to upload a sort of a card. I really loved this interaction. I thought it was really neat. The ability to stretch it out like a spider's web was really beautiful. But in terms of the ability to upload documentation, and we know that this is something we've seen quite a lot from, a lot of the fintechs in more of the B2C space, that this is quite a similar interface, and it works really nicely for them. The map there showing where you spent it, including the logo. We've got our sort of attachment in there, and then the transaction feed. Again, a really nice and densely packed sort of interface here. But we've got the ability to kind of, from my initial takeaway, was take inspiration from what those guys are doing, and then to steal with pride in a lot of ways. You may be able to tell me wrong and say that your transactions feed and that sort of thing came before them. In which case we can talk about that. But then we've got, it's a proven formula. It works. People love it. What do you reckon?
Yes, you're right. But the fact that it's a proven formula, and you said right, when the B2C is already let's say waiving this kind of a user interface, and that's why we wanted to be very similar to that. Yeah. Because in the end, the spender point of view is anyone, and we don't want to invent new patterns and new sort of experience that as a user you have to, again, what is it? A new thing that I have to learn, a new thing that now I don't know how to use. It felt wrong in a way. Cool. And getting you something that you are really familiar with, it's a starting point from where you are adopting Soldo. It's not something incredibly different. I can work with it. Yeah. And in the end, what is important is to, let's say, highlight and generate value for the user. So sure. More than be proud of, we've been the first one or the last one. Well, we are unlocking value for the user. Yeah.
So there we go. Daniele says that competitor analysis is still important. It's something that you need to do. Make sure you're doing it. That's why you need something like Pulse, which is what this show is about, which allows you to take a look at all of the stuff that's out there in the market and compare, and see, get inspiration and that kind of thing. So what are the key requirements for sort of like these users? We've touched on the fact that they may be a little bit more diverse in their in who they are to your initial user base, which was these account managers and sort of finance people within the organization. How did what were your key requirements for those guys?
Basically, with the spenders, they are a new whole concept in a way, because in the whole fashioned way of doing expense reports, etc., they used to do a lot of paperwork, and they used to do a lot of follow-up in this kind of financial processes.
Yeah.
With Soldo, what we are trying to do is to eliminate, or at least getting it more efficient. And at the beginning, in the old processes, the whole responsibility was in the end into the accounting team or the accountants or the financial team to take care of the whole thing and make sure that all the payments were done in the right way.
Yeah.
Now we are like shifting a little bit the burden of the administrator and the accountants in order to help them, and we are asking the spenders, we are asking the employees, we are asking the rest of the company to support one of their team, and simply by capturing a photo of the receipt and inputting a few information that are so close to them, because they are generating the expense.
Yeah.
They are generating the need for that kind of good they are buying.
Okay.
So it's much easier for them to quickly input them, and then everything would be sorted.
Sure. Okay. And so what are the features that matter to these people then, in terms of how are you making these individual people's lives easier? By the closeness and proximity of the documents, but in particular, what do they care about, and how do you make it better for them?
There are a couple of things that are important to the users. One is, as you said, the capturing the photo is something that is connected to the problem of missing the receipt.
Yeah.
So the sooner you capture the photo, the better it is, because otherwise you cannot claim that expense back.
Sure.
And the other one is most of the time you forget that you have to do your expense report. You forget you have to complete your work there, and so we try to remind you that you have to do that with notifications and messages.
Sure.
And that is the very basic tools that we have in place to get the job done.
Nice. And so getting the job done there, what about making it that step easier for the user? Any plans for sort of like a character recognition style product at the minute? Is that something you'd like to do, or anything like that? I would love to see something like that. That would be great for, scanning down the page and seeing all the information and not having to put anything in.
It's true, and what we have already in place is, as in the normal way of working, of managing something and then automating it. What we did was we are providing a user with a lot of fields that they can input in.
Yeah.
And most of them can be automated by a function that is called auto tag.
Okay.
And so that the accountant can immediately recognize, according to the merchant category, the specific tag.
Okay.
So in that way, the user is relieved from inputting more information.
Sure.
We discussed many times about the possibility to have OCR in our product, and it's something that we are quite keen to have. But every time that we analyze it in terms of priorities, we notice that most of the information that are within the receipt are basically coming from us, because we are the issuer of the card and we are authorizing the payment. So we know the merchant name, we know the amount, we know the date, we know basically everything. And so what we don't know is the VAT.
Okay.
And so out of all the work that you could do to do the SCR, to have the VAT is kind of have to be weighted well, because then if we think of VAT, the VAT is mostly coming from the merchant category, because according to the category you have the route amount of VAT.
Okay.
So given the automation of tags and given the connection with the merchant category, we are able also to populate the VAT. And most of the times, I say 90% of the times, we got it right, and there is still a 10%. Well, we have to work, and probably OCR could be the solution for that.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we are requiring the users to fill in for that 10% of the time.
Okay, interesting. And I guess one of the things that I've made, the classic product mistake there of coming up with a solution before I understand the problem. And that seems like you've come up with a very good answer to that, which is, okay, we've considered what we can take already, and then added, figuring out what we can't take, and then, working around that specifically. That's a really cool answer, thank you. So the next thing we'll talk about is we had categorizations from zero and things like that. How would they get in there? We're talking about merchant categorizations, that sort of thing.
Yes, basically we started working with zero 1 year ago, more than 1 year ago. And it was an incredible journey.
Yeah.
Because we started with them working on their accounting platform and working with their APIs.
Yeah.
So everything that you see in our product is the result of working with their APIs. So with a deep integration, I would say so.
Okay. Awesome.
Usually, again, we were saying before, it's an import-export of information from one side or another, where people is still involved in the process. In this very specific case, we don't have the need of having people involved, but they can just sit down and look at, oh, things are working.
Yeah.
That's
That's what you like.
Yeah, fascinating about tech.
Absolutely. And so what kind of information did you request specifically from this API, and what are you looking to get into your transaction feed from them?
Basically, again, it's all related to context, and different companies have different context.
Yeah.
So you have the possibility in Xero to create different tracking categories, they call it so. And so we import these tracking categories and we transform them in lists, in tags, basically. And transforming them in tags means that then we can apply them to the transactions. And once these tracking categories are applied to our transactions, we can push back into Xero, so that basically the accountant has to do nothing else, if not looking at the screen in Xero and see populated by the Soldo
See it
transactions.
all happening in front of him.
Yes.
Cool. And challenges with using sort of things that are outside of your product suite. Are there any particular issues when designing for that sort of thing?
The issue is trying to find out how they call things. Most of the times we notice that there are certain elements that are exactly the same, but you have to find the right naming convention. Basically, it's all about this.
Okay.
As I said, the tracking categories, list of tags, and this was already something different, and we had to work a little bit to, okay, but this is exactly our concept, because behind there is exactly the same data structure and that model. So we have to find the equivalence, and and then.
So it's a data exercise more than anything.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then the final area, which is the accounts area, is the last part of that triumvirate that you said you wanted to address. So we'll go with that. And now it's an expenses section here with sort of toggles on the right, and we've got the ability to click on the zero category, got these codes on the left-hand side, the categories, and then a VAT sort of bit of information right down the middle of the table there. Further on, we've got this transport area for auto tagging, and then below that we have an integration section, so talking then about Xero. And QuickBooks, we've also got relations with there.
Yeah.
You can run the tests and then refresh the feed there. I guess that sends out a fresh API call or something like that. And then clicking on our Xero button, we can see all of the exporting information or things that we need to export. And then with a click of a button, bada bing, bada boom, or we can also click on these little buttons on the left-hand side. Lots of sort of customization functionality here to be able to change over your currencies, your particular users that you want to look at, and then the ability to kind of see an overview of the statements area, so custom, and then filter that via date, and these nice little color differentiators for the different sort of areas that we're looking at, and yeah, it's a very detailed area. Again, side nav sort of pops out and we can export that data. So we've got that clicking on a radio button for the PDF structure. We want the balance, transactions and attachments, and then we click go on the export. A rundown there of your accounts view. I'd say a little more complicated than the other sections potentially. One for the purists, no doubt. But this is these users more maybe have more technical requirements, potentially have more sort of require more features. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, indeed. One of the things that shocked me is when I started looking at all the accounting products out in the market. They are all very dense of information.
Sure.
They need a lot of information. It's almost overwhelming. And but when you talk with these persons having these roles, it's like a breeze. It's like, oh yeah, but it's the normal thing. I used to manage all these things, and I used to do all this work in Excel or on a piece of paper. So all this complexity in reality, what it sounds complex to us, it's not complex to the eyes of somebody that used to do that work. It's like if you think of coding, if you read the code, it's a different language. But if you talk with an engineer, that's easy. It's saying this and that. So it's just a different perception.
It's a different persona as well. I guess you've got to design for. Do you so you've had the process of managing for your admins and designing for your admins, designing for your and then moving on to designing for your spenders, and then you finish off by designing for your accountants specifically. How did you approach that then? Now that you have a persona based on what you understand of these users, is it the same again? You rigorously going through sort of, your process of understanding how to build for these people?
Yes, unfortunately, the process is always the same.
Always the same.
Yes, talking with people is key. Is as basic as a key factor of unlocking what is the reality, trying to understand what they do, how they do it.
Surely it's hard to speak to these people though, because they maybe necessarily don't have much time for user testing. They maybe not the people who, if they're so used to their own product suite, their own spreadsheets, their own sort of paper, then maybe they're not going to be the guys who are most willing to sit down with you for half an hour and talk about,
Yeah, true. We've been very, very lucky because when we started the journey with Xero, there was one, basically working with Xero unlocked us to having the possibility to talk with the accounting firm that are partner with Xero, and we had the possibility to receive the support of one of them, William Fernand, and it gave us a lot of insights, a lot of inputs where basically we didn't expect to have or to be focused on. And so there we understood the value of the tags, with the value of all the additional information that basically transform a transaction into an expense. And that helped a lot. It's true. It's rare to find the right person that is willing to give you their time, and we very much appreciate when it happens.
When it does, for sure. Okay, and so the biggest challenge then for designing for this part of the product suite, was it the complexity? Was it the sort of access to the users? What would you say about that?
The complexity is the different way of company with dealing with different kind of processes. If you move from a small business to an enterprise sort of corporation, you may find a lot of different ways of doing exactly the same job. Everything depends on the level that you are currently dealing with. Most of the time, if you have a small business, you want to achieve your the objectives of your business, and so the accounting world is put on a second level where usually you don't have an accounting firm within your as a department, but you use an external one.
Yeah.
And the more that you grow as a company, so the more complex are your payments, the more complex this more complexity requires to have somebody on board. And then at that point it unlocks a lot of other problems and issues that we can take care of.
Yeah.
In our journey, we looked at two way of dealing with the same problem. One is through Xero, that is very integrated into a streamlined process of I do payments and then I account for them.
Okay.
And the last part where you look at the statement, basically that is the work of most of the small companies. Looking at the statement, downloading it in any other form, and then from there it's good enough. It's good enough to have it printed on paper and archived.
Okay.
And so it depends really on the type of company, and then you may find different way of solving the same problem.
Sure. So we've taken a look there at three kind of very different personas with three within one organization. How would you typically advise someone who came to you and say, look, I'm looking to define a product strategy for a startup that I'm working on, and you've come a long way and you've started to appeal to a broad range of different sort of personas within your particular field? How would you ask them to think about the process, or tell them to think about it?
Try to start from what it seems the closest problem to your reality, so that you can observe it from where you are in a very advantage point of view.
Okay.
So that it could unlock you through other realities, and then make the rest of what you have found as a possible opportunity, and not automatically but easily move from one bit to another by observing it, by looking at it.
Awesome. And the final sort of questions I'm going to ask, and these are two very small ones, are kind of about what you'd like to see happening in the future, and anything you're really excited about, particularly from this product.
I'm really excited about the growth of this product. Basically, what we are dealing with at the moment is an expansion here and there of again more ideas about how to incorporate more processes into our platform, and also how to integrate with more and more platforms out there. As I said at the beginning, our goal is also to mold our product according to the processes that you have already in place. And sometimes you may need an expense management solution. Sometimes you need just a payment solution. Sometimes you need both. And so, according to where you are going, we are more and more able to adjust to your needs. And that, I think it's really it's really exciting, because it means that we can fit wherever you need us to be.
And people seem to like it. We've had one message from a viewer here. I don't know if you can see that. We love Soldo, from Madame Nana. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So yeah, big fan. We also had you guys on one of our live shows, I believe last week, the After Dark 11FS event. So Soldo were involved in that. So they're good friends of the 11FS brand. So I guess that's all we've got time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Stop by for more insights next week and a few more user journeys. If you want to see a little bit more of 11FS Pulse, head over to pulse.11fs.com, where you can request a demo. And if you've got any questions about the product or want to suggest a journey for us to look at either on this show or on our platform, then hit us up, pulse@11fs.com, or find us on Twitter @11fs. Daniele, thank you very much for coming on. If anyone wants to find out a little bit more about Soldo, or maybe about you, what would they typically do?
Contact me on LinkedIn.
Okay, yeah.
It's the best way.
And Soldo on Twitter, no doubt.
Yes.
Yeah, you can follow them for all that good stuff. Great, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Homescreen is a show from the 11FS Pulse product team. It's all about product and design, and in which that we will talk about the cool stuff that cool companies are building right now, trying to learn a few of their secrets and show you what the products actually look and feel like.